Breaking down Arizona Wildcats basketball, U of A falls in the first round of the NCAA tournament to the Princeton Tigers, 59-55. I'm David Kelly, joined as always by Steve Rivera from Fox Sports 1450, Eye on the Ball. And Steve, you've seen quite a few more of these NCAA tournament games than I have. Just what was your assessment of what happened with the Wildcats?
Well, Dave, this is my fifth one, guard play. Arizona's known for being a guard place. They didn't show up today. I think they were 4 for 17 combined, Ramey and Kerr. Not a good day on the perimeter. They couldn't get the ball inside either when they needed to. Fumbled the ball a lot in the last 5 minutes. I think they went scoreless for like 40. That's not Arizona. Last I checked, they scored 80 points a game. Yeah. They could even get points in the final 5 minutes.
Yeah, it was a much slower pace, Steve, than what they're used to. That said, I felt still pretty comfortable 3/4 of the way because they had an advantage. They were scoring when they needed to. But like you mentioned, down the stretch, the offense just kind of seemed to go away, and this is a guard tournament. And I know that Tommy's whole thing has been big guys, rolling through Azuolas Tubelis, rolling through Oumar Ballo, and that worked. But my biggest thing coming into this, Steve, was I thought you're going to have to get big-time performances from the Courtney Rameys, from the Kerr Kriisas, and I think to allow that to happen, you've got to start early trying to get them involved in the offense, but they went inside, and the guards just never found a flow.
Well, and Princeton was smart enough to know that the shooting was not going to go. The shooting from the perimeter was not going to go, so clog it in, let them try to beat you outside, and that wasn't going to happen either. Just very smart play. That's not a shock right from Princeton, how they handled Arizona from start to finish. But we've seen this before. Arizona gets a double-digit lead and kind of dwindles, and it dwindles, and it dwindles, and it dwindled too far today.
Interesting comments after the ball game from Tommy Lloyd. And I want to go back to, I don't know if you saw this play, 2.5 minutes left when Azuolas got stuffed underneath. They went down with the big guy and got a dunk at the other end. And Tommy just came out on the floor and was livid with the officials that Azuolas did not get that call. And after the ball, and we don't really hear Tommy complain about officiating that much. But after today's ball game, he came out and said, hey, the way we dominate inside, we should have gotten more than 7 free throws.
You have, an All-American big guy, an All-Conference big guy. You go inside over and over and over and over again, and you shoot 7 free throws. I mean, I don't know if they're fouls or not, but they must not have been because obviously they didn't get called. And that there's a, when the game is reffed like that, it makes it tough. When you have an advantage that gets, either they're really physical and not fouling, or they're not calling the fouls. And then I haven't reviewed the game, so I'm not saying one way or another. But it makes it tough. And when your advantage gets negated a little bit. And I thought we did a good job, for the most part, having a pretty good conviction of going inside. We didn't make enough shots, and we didn't get rewarded with whistles. And, that's how it goes.
Well, I was surprised with that, too. I heard that. I understood that. That's asking a little bit too much. This is the tournament. Yeah. Let's also remember, Princeton did not go to the free throw line until the final minute of the game. They were 3 for 5 or whatever it was, and they didn't go at all. Arizona was not a free throw good shooting team anyway, but they didn't take advantage of the opportunities when they had that 12-point lead. That's when they should have put the nail in the coffin. They didn't do it.
Well, and if Princeton could have made shots, this would have been a blowout today.
Without question. They were horrible from the three-point line. You're right. Princeton played poorly, actually. 4 for 25, I think it was. They out-rebounded you. They beat Arizona a lot of numbers. Yeah. Arizona didn't play well. Princeton didn't play well either. That would have been something had Princeton played really well.
Well, and I think the other thing was the defense. I mean, there were just way too many drives to the basket for Princeton, too many points at the rim, 42 points in the paint. And you mentioned the other number. They out-rebounded the Wildcats in this ball game, Steve. And of the 8 losses, 5 of those games, Arizona got outboarded.
Yeah, no question. Let me say this to you, David. I've always said this, and especially on the radio show, if the carry is not big, they're not going to play. There were some mentions in the locker room they didn't have the energy. It was mentioned to Coach Tommy Lloyd, and he was a bit surprised. I don't know if this carrot was big enough that maybe they thought that Princeton was just going to be Princeton, and then they show up. That's never the case in this tournament. When is Arizona going to learn? Yeah. First round, 6th round, whatever round, You got to show up.
This is interesting with this. I mean, obviously, this is probably the most international team that we've had here. And one of the things we began to hear last year was that, these kids, they didn't grow up with this. They didn't understand it. Azuolas came out yesterday and said, I think I understand it now. Do you think that is to their detriment, that they don't really understand the dynamic of what this environment is about?
Yeah, that's hard to say. Last year they did what they did. They got into the Sweet 16, played a tough team. They just ran up against a team that was methodical and a team that they always have trouble against. The number one thing is slow Arizona down, you have a chance. I think last week they got a little comfortable in beating UCLA in the same style. Remember, they beat them on a last-second shot.
Yeah.
That was a close one. It could have been a lucky one. This time, not so lucky.
Interesting after the game. I mean, we see this from Tommy. He's very even-keeled. But I thought it was interesting how he says he's even-keeled. But I think I don't know if you heard this in I think it was the press conference after the loss, the last loss, where when did they lose last? They lost UCLA. At UCLA, where the next press conference he came out and said that he didn't sleep for a couple of days, which I thought was interesting because he always kind of presents this even keel, but he admitted there that maybe these losses, he's not presenting it to us, but these losses get to him more than he's leading on to.
Which led me to believe that at halftime, I wonder if he lit into them because they played without emotion. They played very stoic. It reminds me of Azuolas. Wouldn't have Azuolas been excitable, right? This team didn't play with that purpose. Maybe he did, maybe they didn't. They just don't get it from him. But I know the fans are upset because they don't see that from Tommy. They don't get that excitement from Tommy. If he's not going to sleep then, or he didn't sleep then, he ain't going to sleep now.
Any final thoughts, Steve, on what is next? Azuolas Tubelis, is he coming back? You think? I'd have to believe that he's probably going on to professional ball.
And I think that he might stay. And I couldn't tell you why. I get that feeling, and you could probably be right. This team's going to be okay. Okay, what that means, I do not know.
Right. Kylan Boswell obviously is a guy that you're looking for in the future. For the minutes that he was out there, showed very well of himself, and I think that's a kid that when we talk about guard play, he might have the capability of being that type of guard that this program is used to. You got to get back to at least having a guard who can penetrate the middle and create in that environment.
And many thought he should be playing more because Kerr had not been playing up to people's standards. And that could have been another question for him, and maybe one down the road, because Kerr needs to figure out what he's going to do. He needs to get better without question.
We don't want to obviously speculate to what his situation was. He could have been hurt. We don't know what the injury factor was to his shoulder, how that limited him. Obviously, Bala, we know, was dealing with a hand situation. But again, I mean, there's a lot of teams in this tournament that are dealing with injuries at this time of year, and you got to be able to, if you're going to be a team that's a championship mentality, you got to be able to work through that.
Without question. He didn't want to make excuses, but again, this is the second time in Arizona's history that they go down to a 15 seed. And overall,
but there's no Steve Nash, I don't think, on that. I mean, the big guy was impressive, but you think he's an NBA player, Owana?
He could be. It could be a very smart guy, crafty, and at the end of the day, you have to play together as a team. Princeton played that way to beat a pretty good Arizona team.
All right, just the 11th time in history that a number 15 seed has beaten a number 2, and as Steve mentioned, the second time it has happened to your Arizona Wildcats. 59-55, the final. Princeton wins it. Steve, as always, I appreciate you.
Thank you, Dave, as always.
All right, stay with us. Continuing coverage of Arizona Wildcats basketball. News 4 Tucson Sports.